In a world where news breaks at the speed of light, one creator is changing war reporting forever.
For me, it's really important to take what we're doing in the field as part of our reporting for Fox and sometimes cut it into digestible bits for social media.
Yingst, Fox's News chief foreign correspondent, takes us behind the scenes of modern conflict journalism.
And whether that was on the ground in Afghanistan after the Taliban took over, or whether it was in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv the night the Russians invaded the country, or whether it's in Gaza or in southern Israel as this war has developed.
From selfie videos in war zones to viral TikToks from the front lines, discover how social media is reshaping the way we consume news.
A new generation of people, they're consuming news in a different way. They're consuming it on social media. They're consuming it on their phones, on the go.
This is an eye-opening journey into the future of journalism, where creators are becoming the new face of reporting. So today on the podcast, I'm joined by Yingst. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ian.
I'm really excited to talk to you about your journey as a creator and how you use social media. But before we start, can you just tell us about your journey into becoming the chief foreign correspondent for Fox?
Absolutely. So I went to school in Washington, D.C., and I graduated back in 2016. But while I was at American University, I started a company called News to Share with one of my friends at school. And it was an opportunity to report in the field and be a war correspondent while also still a student. And this was my first taste of international journalism. And I traveled all over the world, from Ukraine to Gaza to sub-Saharan Africa. And this is when I think my passion was really sparked for what I'm doing today. And what's so interesting is that 10 years later, I'm still reporting on the ground in the Middle East, where I started my career. But now I'm doing it at such a higher level at the #1 channel in the United States. And the reach is just so massive. And I think that it comes with a responsibility that I didn't have 10 years ago. And so that has really been, I think, the most significant part of this journey is just understanding how important our coverage is on the ground. And now personally, as the chief foreign correspondent for Fox, leading all of our foreign coverage, not just from places like Israel and Gaza, but also places like Afghanistan and Ukraine, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iraq, all of the places that I've been on assignment for Fox since I started.
Amazing. And can you tell us how you started to embrace social media amongst your reporting?
Yeah, I find that meeting your audience where they're at is very important. You know, there are millions of people who want to watch on TV, and they have cable, and each day or night they sit down and they sit in front of their TV and watch the news. A new generation of people, they're consuming news in a different way. They're consuming it on social media. They're consuming it on their phones, on the go. And so for me, it's really important to take what we're doing in the field as part of our reporting for Fox and sometimes cut it into digestible bits for social media. And I use a lot of different platforms to do that. I use TikTok, I use Instagram, I use X, and also some Facebook, to ensure that wherever people are consuming the news, I can meet them there. And I started doing more of this content back during the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. I found that people were constantly hungry for news updates that they could get watching Fox, but oftentimes they wanted to dive deeper into the story. They wanted to go behind the scenes and understand more about what they were viewing on TV. And social media was a unique opportunity to do that in a creative way that I think allowed my audience to connect with me as an individual, to take them to the places that they couldn't go, but the places they were interested in. And whether that was on the ground in Afghanistan after the Taliban took over, or whether it was in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv the night the Russians invaded the country, or whether it's in Gaza or in southern Israel as this war has developed. And so for me, it's about meeting the audience where they're at and trying to pique a new generation of interest in a traditional style of news. And you'll notice that about my journalism, it's focused on the greats of this industry, the Edward R. Murrows and the Walter Cronkites, the people who approach journalism from an objective standpoint, who wanted to inform the world. That's what I base all of my reporting off of. But the interesting part about the coverage now is that I can now meet people where they're at on their phones, on the go.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic how you're able to do that. And can you talk through in a bit more detail, like the different content formats that you use and how you're able to really reach the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that a combination of photography and selfie videos really help people to understand the story at hand. And I think that the selfie video is really the thing that allows someone to go a little bit deeper into the story in the field. And I remember the first time that I had a video on TikTok go viral in this format, and I was riding in the back of a pickup truck with the Taliban. And it was a quick video, and very quickly, a younger audience attached to it, and they hadn't seen anything like it before. It was something new and something fresh. And so I've sort of recreated that format all over the world in the field because the idea is to show that I'm on scene, that I'm reporting, and giving some pieces of information maybe that don't make it into our television reports, but also be able to drive the traffic from social media and encourage people to get back to the television when they have the chance to sit down and watch the extended version of our report. And so I've experimented with a lot of different formats for social media. And depending on the platform, the type of content that I provide is different. I find that on TikTok, those types of videos work very well. They want to connect with the content creator. I find that on Instagram, there are a variety of videos that do well. Those are very shareable pieces of content, but also raw video from the field, whether it's a rocket being intercepted or some video from inside Gaza showing the level of destruction firsthand that my team and I are witnessing. And then on X, it's a variety of videos, but also just text updates. And the new updates to X allow you to italicize or put in bold your updates. And in a way, this is sort of this new newsletter format of consumption for media. And I find that people will share this very quickly because, again, this comes back to people wanting updates in real time around the clock. They want details. If they're interested in a story, and let's say they're watching Fox and they see that an attack has unfolded against Israel or the Israeli military is now going inside Gaza, they're watching that report on TV. But if they want to dive deeper and they're just hungry for little updates about what's happening, some color to the story, some context to what's happening, that's where they can go on X and they can follow my page and they can see those updates in real time.
I mean, it's fascinating to hear how you're using the platforms. How do you think about the ethical considerations of sort of reporting and sharing the real-time updates on those platforms?
So I think the ethical consideration is really important to me personally. Witnessing these things firsthand, I understand how sensitive that the coverage can be. And look, as a journalist in a war zone, we have a checklist of things that we think about. The number one priority for war correspondents is safety, because we need to make sure that we can gather this content and this information and this reporting and then get back to tell the story to our audience. For me, ethics is of the utmost importance. And when we're covering an active war zone where things are changing very quickly, you have civilians involved. Oftentimes, people are killed or injured in front of you. And so you have to think about that as you are reporting. And you'll notice if you go back to my coverage from Black Saturday, October 7th, that morning when my team and I were in southern Israel during the Hamas attack, I was very open about the ethical consideration that I was making and the questions that I was asking myself in real time to ensure that our journalism was at the highest quality possible. And I even was open with the audience on social media about that in real time, saying to people, look, I have more information and I'm just not giving it to you right now because amid the chaos of this unfolding attack and this war that has now erupted before my eyes, I want to ensure that I'm erring on the side of caution. And so I have numbers about people that have been taken hostage. I have videos of casualties in southern Israel. And I'm being very careful about what I'm sharing in real time because with great power comes great responsibility. And when you have the power to reach an audience of millions, you have to be responsible and not share just horribly graphic video in real time. You have to consider that these are all people. And those are part of the considerations that I make on a daily basis as a war correspondent in the field to ensure that my social media journalism aligns with the standards of our television journalism. And that's the very top of the industry. And that's just how I try to make sure that there's a synergy between the two. And if I'm not putting something on TV, I'm not going to put it on social media. And if there is a time where I'm doing a more in-depth report, let's say on an airstrike in Gaza where many civilians are killed, I'm very thoughtful in the way that I tell that story, because for me, it's very important to talk to everyone involved in these stories, with Israelis, with Palestinians, with top officials on both sides of the border, and the story that I'm covering right now, but also ensure that there are humans involved, and ensure that the audience is not shocked or too surprised by what they are seeing. And so when that comes back to television, I will put a warning on screen, sometimes in a lower third, or I will say to the audience, warning, what you're about to see is incredibly graphic. I just want to let you know. Some of the audience members may find this shocking. And then sometimes we'll even go above and beyond to blur the video in real time. And if I go back to social media, and you'll see just in my conversation about this, there's a synergy among all of this. On social media, I try to put similar warnings. And so if I'm putting an Instagram story up, for example, and I'm going to put a photo on my story that is very graphic of maybe a body that we came across, I will put a slide beforehand that says, warning, there's going to be a graphic image coming up. And that's to let the audience know you don't have to view this, but if you do decide to view it, it may be something that's uncomfortable to consume.
Got it. I mean, that makes absolute sense. And I think it's amazing what you're doing. You're at the forefront of reporting on social media. How do you see it evolving within the creator economy, other people reporting on things in a similar way?
I think that news is becoming incredibly popular on social media, and you see a lot of new content creators who are focused on news. And so I think that will continue to grow. And I'm someone who loves the media industry. I consume all types of media. I'm always looking forward to what the next big thing in media is. And I think you'll continue to see more streaming platforms. And this is something we've experimented with a little bit on the social media side, whether it's TikTok Live or Instagram Lives or going live on X. And you're starting to see these conversations expand in a way that people want to talk about the news they're consuming. And that's really interesting, because traditionally people have consumed news and they sit maybe at home or at the table and they're watching the television. Well, these social media platforms have now allowed the audience to start engaging in the news. And it's part of our role as journalists to encourage these high ethical standards of consumption. And that can be challenging in today's media environment, but that's also part of the work that we do as journalists, train professionals to go into the field, gather these stories, and ensure that we are providing all perspectives, that we're providing an unfiltered and unvarnished reality of what's happening on the ground, and then allow people to make their own decisions about the information that they are receiving or the information that they are viewing. And so I think you'll continue to see a shift in the industry as a whole as social media gets more and more popular and the way that people consume videos changes. And I think that's really interesting just from a standpoint of, if you look at the content that we're creating, not just on social media, but at Fox, right? Like there are opportunities for longer form things like Fox Nation, where we'll do documentary pieces. You have, of course, Fox News Channel, where we're doing our daily updates. But then there are also things like Live Now, where we are doing reports on a streaming service where people are going to a place like YouTube and they are viewing the news and then maybe viewing a press conference, and it allows them to dive deeper. And then if they personally connect with the journalists like myself, they can go to X and they can see if there are any updates there. And I think that it allows people to curate their news diet in a way that, yes, there are many, many options to consume. And the hope is that long term, it allows not only a more creative industry, but it allows the people who are providing the highest quality content with the best and latest information that's been verified and authenticated to rise to the top. And I've found that on X in recent months. Just over the past year, I've gained more than 300,000 followers on X, and it's a
Wow.
platform that I've always used. But just the amount of voices that you see on X, everyone from lawmakers to Elon Musk, they're following my updates on X. And I find that really interesting because, again, I always want to be encouraging people to see these real-time updates and then turn on Fox. Watch the report that we went out and shot all day in the field, risking our lives to get, because at the end of the day, that's, my focus. I have the core story that I'm covering for the day, but there are opportunities to add a little bit more color to what we're doing And that is why I use so much social media. And you'll see these real-time updates from the field, because if there's a strike and it's in front of us, and we're not going to be on TV for an hour, or we're going to cut together a package for special report, for example, sometimes there are opportunities to post those updates in real time. And that's what I try to do.
I mean, it's amazing what you do. It's not an easy job. And I know that you've got a new book, Black Saturday, which addresses the mental health of war reporters. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Black Saturday is the gold standard in journalism about the October 7th massacre, Black Saturday, and the war that followed. It is a book like no other because it takes the reader into that day, not just from the perspective of my team on the ground in southern Israel as the attack is unfolding, but you also hear firsthand accounts from police officers, from soldiers, from survivors, from hostages who were taken from their homes and dragged into Gaza and then later released as part of the November ceasefire deal. But then when you look at the other side of the border, you hear from Palestinian civilians, from doctors, from journalists, from Hamas officials. And it allows the reader to understand what happened on the morning of October 7th, both in southern Israel and in Gaza. And then it takes the reader through the days after as we go into these communities along the border, the kibbutzim, as they're referred to, and inside Gaza with the Israeli military, hearing from all people involved. Because again, this goes back to what we talked about, my approach to journalism for the past 10 years. It's to follow in the footsteps of the greats that came before me, the Murrows and the Cronkites, the people who built this industry, who did journalism from a place of objectivity with a focus on information and a focus on informing the audience. And that's how I conduct myself in the field. It's, I think, the core of Black Saturday, the book that I wrote about our coverage on the morning of October 7th and the war that followed. It's a story about humans, and the humans that were so affected by this war. And I sometimes struggle to find the words to talk about it in a short format. And that's part of the reason that I wrote a book about this, because there are so many stories and so many feelings that I had. And when you talk about the personal side, right, and the mental health challenges with covering such a story, it's very hard to report in war zones in real time. And you think about all the things that you have to juggle. You have to focus on getting the live shot out on Fox News. For me, I have to also focus on getting my social media updates out there, making sure my audience is informed about what's happening in real time. And then once all those things are done and we're safe and we have the story for the day, then sometimes I have a chance to reflect and think about the things that we saw in real time, the people that died in front of us, the horrific nature of war that unfolded before our eyes. And there are real realities that come along with experiencing these types of events.
And how do you personally prepare mentally and physically for something like that?
I am a big believer in preparing mentally and physically for war during times of peace. I love the old proverb, the quote, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war." And the concept is that you are prepared all the time for a story to develop, hoping that one never does. And I always tell people, this is a story that I wished never happened. I wish that I didn't have to write this book. But as a journalist in a war zone, it's my job, if something like this happens, to inform the public about what took place. And so the mental and physical preparation is critical. On the physical front, I go to the gym on a daily basis. I go on runs. I want to make sure that my cardio is really at the highest level it can be, so that I'm physically ready to go day or night, anytime, long days, sometimes without sleep and limited food and resources. And then on the mental side, I've found a variety of different ways to, I think, consume internally the information that we receive and also the scenes that we view. Meditation has been really big for me. Also, just a healthy diet. I stopped drinking alcohol at the beginning of last year, so it's been almost 2 years since I drank alcohol. I also do cold exposure, whether it's cold showers or going to cold plunges. And the idea with all of this is just to be in control of the mind, to have the mental discipline to be the best in the world. because I don't take this job lightly. To lead Fox's foreign coverage, it's a lot of responsibility, not just here in the Middle East, but around the world. And so it's something that you have to be constantly prepared for. And you have to remember that I went to bed on October 6th, not knowing that I would wake up and be reporting for the next year straight. And for those first few months of the war without a single day off to make sure that our audience was updated. I didn't know that that was going to happen, but I was ready. And so my team and I immediately jumped into action and we did what we do best, and that is reporting live news in real time.
It's fascinating to hear you tell these stories. How do you ensure a balanced perspective in your reporting on something so tricky as the conflict?
It's a great question. And I would say that a lot of it has to do with long-term relationships that were built before Black Saturday. I've reported inside the Gaza Strip many times. The first time I went to Gaza, I was 20 years old during the 51-day war between Israel and Hamas. And since I started at Fox News more than 6 years ago, I have focused on a lot of my relationships off air, going into Gaza, speaking with civilians, speaking with Hamas officials, with Islamic Jihad officials. I'm one of the only journalists in the world that has been around the Al-Qassam brigades of Hamas and also elite forces in the Israeli military. I'm one of the only journalists in the world who has interviewed senior Hamas leadership and also interviewed senior Israeli leadership. And that's because I built trust with all individuals involved. And I think Black Saturday is a great example of this. But if you look at any of our reports or you go back through my coverage of the war, you'll notice that I am a huge advocate on the reality that two things can be true at once. And that's that the October 7th massacre against Israelis was the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. The Israeli response to that massacre has been the largest killing of Palestinians in the history of the people. And it's my job as a journalist to talk to everyone involved, to speak with Hamas leadership, to speak with Israeli leadership, to speak with Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians, and at the end of the day, to humanize the civilians involved. Because my goal as a journalist is to bring people together while I am holding those in power accountable and while I am informing the world about the objective realities on the ground. But when there are opportunities in my coverage to allow the viewer or the consumer or the reader to empathize with the people that they are learning about, I take that opportunity. And if you go deeper into my social media, you'll see that I have an entire Instagram page devoted to my passion in photography. It's called Experience Humans. And I built out this page because I wanted people to look at still photos and say, well, wait, that kid kind of looks like someone in my neighborhood, or maybe it looks like my child, or that looks like my brother or my sister or my mom or my dad. Because the idea is for people to understand that everyone involved in these conflicts around the world, they're all human. They all feel, they all laugh, they all love, they all smile. And when there are opportunities as a journalist on the ground in these really challenging environments, I want people to watch my reports or see my updates on social media or read my book, Black Saturday, and leave the consumption of that media with an open mind, with a mind of maybe there is a chance to have a conversation about the news that we are learning about. And if I can just spark that conversation, I feel that I've done my job.
Amazing. Well, Trey, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. And I love how you're having an impact with social media. Before we wrap up, can you share any advice for up-and-coming journalists that are thinking about using social media as a form of content creation?
Absolutely. I love sharing the advice that I learned because 10 years ago, I was that university student who wanted to be a foreign correspondent. And I would say two things. I would say that the first thing to do is to set a long-term goal. Know where you're headed. Have a direction. Because if you know broadly where you want to go, then you can do something toward that goal every day. And the second thing is to put in discipline and consistent hard work. And that means working 7 days a week. And some people will say Well, I don't want to work 7 days a week. I'd like to have a weekend. But it's always the first question that I ask students when I talk to them. I say, what are your plans for this weekend? And most of the time they say, well, I'm going to go to the park or I'm going to go out with my friends. And that's okay. You should find a balance between your personal and professional lives. But if you have that goal in mind, especially on social media, because you can be creating content 24/7, you can be working on this every day on your own schedule. The advice that I have is to put in the work. Understand that I didn't have more than 400,000 X followers overnight. I've been on X for more than 10 years. It didn't take a week to get 800,000 TikTok followers. These are things that are the result of consistent and disciplined behavior, putting high quality updates out to my audience. And I would encourage you to do the same. Believe in yourself. Know that if you set a goal and you work toward that goal every day, you'll get there.
Very wise words there. And that consistency is something that we hear time and time again on the podcast, that creators mustn't give up, but just keep on going. And I think you've really exemplified that with your work. And yeah, it's fascinating to hear about it. Thank you for sharing your time and good luck with everything and your reporting moving forward.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Thank you.
If you have that goal in mind, especially on social media, because you can be creating content 24/7, you can be working on this every day on your own schedule. The advice that I have is to put in the work. Understand that I didn't have more than 400,000 X followers overnight. I've been on X for more than 10 years. It didn't take a week to get 800,000 TikTok followers. These are things that are the result of consistent and disciplined behavior, putting high quality updates out to my audience. And I would encourage you to do the same. Believe in yourself. Know that if you set a goal and you work toward that goal every day, you'll get there.
Very wise words there. And that consistency is something that we hear time and time again on the podcast, that creators mustn't give up, but just keep on going. And I think you've really exemplified that with your work. And yeah, it's fascinating to hear about it. Thank you for sharing your time and good luck with everything and your reporting moving forward.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Thank you.